Good morning and thank you for stepping into the foul play land. As always, I'm your foul player. And I wanted to make this video about some draft prognostications, if you will. I'm going to try to do other sports besides boxing, and the NFL draft is actually one of the things I love talking about because I love grading prospects. I love young talent in every sport. And I want to try to make my foray into videos like this prior to the NFL draft happening. This video is not a New York Giant video, but instead a New York Jet video, which a lot of my non-boxing sports videos I'm gonna try to make in the future are gonna relate mostly, if not all, to the teams here in New York, um, which are teams that I'm a fan of. Every New York team except the Yankees. Um, but let me get right into it though. And the question that I want to propose is if the Jets had a chance at drafting all around very toolsy linebacker out of Clemson, Isaiah Simmons, or potential number one receiver, Jerry Jeudy, who should they draft? Um, and I propose this question because I think that one of these players, if not both, potentially, may end up dropping in the draft. I think that number one and two are set in the draft as far as Chase Young and Joe Burrow. Um, but I think at the number three spot, the Detroit Lions may potentially trade down with a team that might fall in love with Tua Tagovailoa or another quarterback. I think Tua Tagovailoa is going to go in the top five. I think Miami is a good landing place for him. Um, but even in spite of that, I think teams could move up either with Detroit. I mean, if somebody wants to leapfrog Miami for Tua Tagovailoa, they could go to Detroit and make that trade. Or if a team like the Chargers or the Steelers wants to draft a quarterback of the future, they could jump high into the first round. Or I mean, it's more likely that they jump in the back end of the first round. But a team could fall in love with Love out of Utah, with Jacob Eason from Washington, with trying to think off the top of my head. But there's a couple good quarterbacks. I mean, and a lot of teams that need some or that have aging quarterbacks on their roster with no good backups. The Colts are another team that could look into quarterback, though I think they may look into free agency more than the draft necessarily, and I don't see them going into the first round. But I'm just throwing names out there. Having said that, though, with that happening, if teams trade up into the first 10 picks, the Jets drafting at 11, um, could potentially move up to snag one of these really good players in Isaiah Simmons or Jerry Jeudy, or one of these players could drop down to them. And I'm gonna throw CeeDee Lamb into the mix as far as like should the Jets draft him, but I'm actually using just Isaiah Simmons and Jerry Jeudy into this scenario mostly because I think CeeDee Lamb, a lot of people are falling in love with him as we get closer to the draft, and I think he may go ahead of Jerry Jeudy. And if that happens, that just gives the Jets a better chance at drafting Jerry Jeudy. So let me get right into the nuts and bolts of this video. Isaiah Simmons, as a lot of guys may know, I think some people have him as the second best or even first best defensive player in this draft. All around good linebacker. He could rush the passer to a degree. He's also, for a linebacker, for a big linebacker, very, very good in coverage. Um, uh, has a lot of tools. I think he may potentially lock down a good two-thirds of the tight ends in the league as far as coverage goes. As far as his pass rush goes, I think he's more of a tricky pass rusher. He gets a better pass rush off in the middle rather than on the edge. I think he could do both well, but he's better going blasting up the middle when there's a hole created for him rather than like on the edge. I think on the edge he's okay, um, but he's more of a guy like that has more of an effect when you don't send him and then all of a sudden you do send him on a blitz or rushing the passer and like when you're not expecting it, he's a little bit better in those scenarios. Um, the Jets could use somebody like Jerry Jeudy because we have a lot of our defensive line in place. What the Jets, as everybody may know, that the Jets need desperately a pure pass rusher, and I think that Simmons may not fit the description as a pure pass rusher. But if we did have a pure pass rusher, I mean, like per se, in free agency, and we had the opportunity of drafting Isaiah Simmons, I'm not gonna cry one bit. I won't cry if I draft either one of these players or CeeDee Lamb. Um, but and a lot of people were discussing this for the Giants with Isaiah Simmons because the Giants desperately need linebackers, and a lot of people were saying that the Giants should be looking at Isaiah Simmons at number 4. I don't think that's a good look because the Giants need so many players on the defense, but we'll stick just to the Jets. Um, the next guy I'm going to talk about, Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver 1 out of Alabama. Alabama had a pretty good receiving core this year with Diggs, or headlined by Diggs and Jerry Jeudy. Jeudy is an underrated prospect to me. I think a lot of people saw him as the best receiver in the draft this year, and lately, I think a lot of people have been falling off on him. I think because of his size, he's like 6'1", probably 180 pounds. But CeeDee Lamb, when they compare him to Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb's about 6'3", and they're both phenomenal. I think they're both nasty. The thing of it is that Jerry Jeudy is a player, like in my eyes, and so is Isaiah Simmons. But Jerry Jeudy is a player at the receiving position. Um, he does a lot of jukes. He does a lot of stuff before he catches the ball that creates distance for himself. He's just a pain in the ass to defend against. And on top of that, too, he has phenomenal hands. I love receivers that have good hands. Um, the whole enigma of needing a receiver to be like big for you to throw up the ball to him. I think a lot of that stuff, though it's a good tool to have, it's a great tool to have, but you don't need that receiver as much anymore in today's NFL. You need that guy that when you get him in short distances that could create a lot of yards after the catch. And I think Jerry Jeudy has that with creating that distance himself, by like I said earlier, doing these little juke moves and by being evasive. But his biggest talent with his hands, I think, is his biggest plus for me, because I mean, looking at yesterday's game with the Ravens and the Titans, a lot of these receivers weren't even catching the ball. And Jerry Jeudy having that ability to create space for himself with and without the ball. I mean, like I could picture him yesterday's game, and like Lamar Jackson probably could have carved up the Titans defense. He's just good. I mean, like with a lot of teams going like yesterday, they were playing like zone against Lamar Jackson. Um, the zone is going to give you 5 or 6 yards for free, pretty much, by just throwing it into these open spaces. I mean, if you have a receiver that could catch it no matter what, I mean, that's 5 or 6 yards. That's 2nd and 4, 2nd and 5, rather than like 2nd and 10. With a lot of these receivers yesterday, I saw they were dropping the ball. And the only one who was having a real effect in yesterday's game was Hollywood Brown. But that's more of an over the top receiver. I mean, even though he could catch it, and he could be a zone killer too, but the Ravens don't need him to be a zone killer. They need all the other receivers to be zone killers, and they couldn't make it happen yesterday. But in the Jets' predicament, I think that the Jets should re-sign Robbie Anderson. Maybe give him 12, 13 million. I know it's a lot, but the receiving options that are in free agency are pretty bad. But if you pair up Jerry Jeudy with a Robbie Anderson, I mean, Robbie Anderson could be an over the top guy, and Jerry Jeudy could fill everything else. Hopefully, Gase gets his head out of his rear end and starts utilizing Le'Veon Bell as a passing option. But with those three right there, man, it's a tremendous pairing for receivers. So if you left it to me and the choice was between Isaiah Simmons or Jerry Jeudy, as much as I like Isaiah Simmons, I gotta go with Jerry Jeudy. And I also say that if CeeDee Lamb were the pick here against Isaiah Simmons, I'd also go with CeeDee Lamb in this pick, only because I want to give Sam Darnold pieces to work with in the future. I think our defense is pretty good, with the exception of needing a pass rusher. Having said that, Isaiah Simmons doesn't fit the role of a pure pass rusher, and I think we may have to either sign one in free agency, which the options aren't fantastic neither. I think the only great option to me or good option is Dante Fowler. But Isaiah Simmons doesn't fit the role of the pure pass rusher. I mean, like to me, I think he'd be dope for the Jets defense. No question about it. But I'd rather have Jeudy or CeeDee Lamb, the dynamo receiver on our team. I think we've been needing that, and it would be good to grow Darnold with one of those two guys, CeeDee Lamb or Jeudy. More so Jeudy. Um, and if we re-sign Robbie Anderson, who he got comfortable with later on in the year, because as you may know, Sam Darnold was out for the early portion of the year, suffering with mono. But as the year progressed, he got really comfortable with Robbie Anderson, and we started winning games like towards the latter portion of the year, in spite of bad coaching with Gase and our offense not being all the way up to snuff. But we only need little things on our defense to make our defense even more dynamic than what it is, particularly like cornerbacks. And I don't think there's anybody besides Okuda that's worth that pick at number 11 at the cornerback position or safety position. So these are the two guys I'd take. And a reason I also see like that I wanted to mention why this could happen as far as these two players dropping is that a lot of people are going to need offensive linemen in this draft. And I think a lot of people may draft Tristan Wirfs in the top 10, even though I don't think he's worth it. I think people could fall in love with another lineman, the kid out of USC or the kid from Alabama, and may get froggy and jump into the top 10. In spite of like my assessment of Jeudy and Isaiah Simmons or CeeDee Lamb and why I would rather pick them, I think that the offensive line is a greater need, but the talent pool starts to fall off after the Georgia lineman, who I think is going to go number 4 to the Giants anyway, Thomas. If that's the case, I don't think none of those other linemen are worth it more than these two guys, Jeudy and Simmons. And I think that we could address the lineman position later on in the draft, or maybe even move up in the draft. We have 3 third-round picks. We could potentially move up into the first round and draft a guy later on in the draft. Trey Adams from Washington is a nasty-ass lineman. I don't think he's going to go fall that hard. But you have Trey Adams. You got Tristan Wirfs. I mean, like if he doesn't drop, you have Cosney, or Sam Cosney out of Texas. Those are all real good linemen. Not only good linemen, but they're really good tackles. And one of them could potentially drop. So I think we could address our dire need for linemen later on in the draft. Like I said, with those 3 third-round picks. Because I don't think we have a second-round pick this year, if I remember correctly. But I'd rather leave the picking of maybe 1 or 2 linemen. I hope they come out of the draft with 2 higher picks for linemen. But I think we could address that later on in the draft and get a dynamic player like Jeudy early on. I think Jeudy may be one of the most special players of this draft, bar none. I think he's just a gamer. I think Chase Young doesn't strike me as a gamer. I think Chase Young is a talent, no doubt, man. I think, but Jeudy, I mean, I just see something special in him, and I really want him with the Jets. Let me know what you guys think. What will your selection be? Let me know if you think I'm wrong, if I'm right. But I hope you subscribe, and I'm going to do a similar video like this for the Giants. Having said that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Peace.